Alright, so what's going on? Today seems like a great day to talk about editing this particular photo here, or in particular, this type of color theme. Dark, dramatic, and moody photos have become really popular, and they can be difficult to edit if you're not familiar with how to edit them. So I'm going to start producing videos where I'm going to go through my actual editing process in terms of how I create these different photos, or how I edit these different photos. Let's take a look at the original of this photo. We can see there's actually quite a significant difference in this photo here, and this was like also one of my favorite photos that I've taken this past winter. Before we even get into editing this particular photo, one of the most important things about creating moody and dramatic looking photos is to shoot in the right conditions for it. It's going to be really difficult to try and get an image like this or any other of my dark and dramatic looking photos if you go out in a broad, blue sky, it's bright, it's sunny, there's not a cloud in the sky kind of day. This look just doesn't really work that well with it. There are moody looks that work with blue sky days, but this is not one of them. So let's go ahead and jump right on into this photo. And let's reset this photo so we're back to square one. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into my basic tab and I'm going to rack my exposure all the way up and all the way down to see what kind of details I got. And I can see I have got some small details in the sky there and plenty of details in the shadows on these trees and these branches right here. But I don't think that's going to be a big deal because we're going to bring the light way down in this photo. As a matter of fact, where the light's at right now is about accurate. So the first thing that I'm going to do now is I'm going to rack the whites up and I'm going to take the shadows way up. And I'm going to bring the blacks up just a little bit. And then I'm going to take my contrast and I'm going to shoot that way up as well. And one thing that using the contrast slider does is it also increases your color. Now, I'm going to make this a very desaturated, almost muted looking photo, so that's not a huge deal for us today. I'm just going for this sharp contrast. So we'll come down here and we'll drop the vibrance way down, like negative 30, 36. I'm going to take my clarity up, and I'm going to bring my texture up. The texture is just going to make these branches right here pop really well. Dehaze, I'm not going to mess with that right now. And I like where the white balance is at. That looks fine. Now we'll go into our tone curve, go into this one, and we're going to add a point curve here for a medium contrast. And I'm going to actually remove this point here, and I'm going to take this bottom point and I'm going to curve it up. And that's going to lift the black point a little bit and make it look a little sort of faded. This is how you get that faded look. Press and hold Alt. I'm going to drag these darks down. Not that much, just a little bit. And our whites are good here. I'm going to bring this white point down. Try and bring or allow some more detail in the sky to come back out. That's alright for the time being. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the actual color itself. And then we're going to do some final exposure tweaks after that. So again, I'm going for a muted photo here. So a lot of colors we're not going to need. We're going to just mute all these colors except for the blues. We're going to leave the blues exactly where they are. Luminance, I'm not going to mess with that either. Now we'll go down to the color grading, and we're going to want a lot of blue in here. So let's drop a lot of deep, dark blues in here into the shadows. I'm going to make those a little bit darker too. Highlights, same thing with the blues, but I'm going to go with a lighter tone blue, kind of a tealy, almost baby blue for the highlights. I'll make that almost where it was. And our midtones, same thing. We're going to make these blue. And we're just going to go for a very subtle, deeper blue. Something to that effect. I'm going to come down to calibration at this point. And I'm going to bring the blue primary, the hue of it, to the left to negative 21. And I'm going to bring the saturation. What's it look like all the way up? Really isn't no difference. We're just going to leave that at negative 14. Now I can come back up to the exposure settings and we can work on our exposure. So I'm going to bring the highlights down, try and bring some detail in. I'm going to bring the whites back down. I'm going to bring the blacks down some more. I'll bring the shadows down some more. I'm going to bring the overall exposure down. Something like that. That's looking good. Now I'm going to take this crop feature and I'm going to crop into 4x5, which would be an 8x10. And I'm going to leave the horizon of this tree that's flush with the grass on this bottom line right here. This bottom part of the rule of thirds. Now that's looking pretty good. And I think I'm going to take a mask here. I'm going to do a radial gradient. And we're going to draw a radial gradient around this tree. Just adjust it a little bit there. And we're going to take the highlights and the whites and bring those up so we can make our tree look like it's being hit with more light so it stands out from the background more. That looks really nice. And now I'm going to bring the white balance down a little bit. Actually, at -5 was perfect. Now I think there's a little bit too much punch in here, so I'm going to bring the clarity back down. That looks a lot better. I'm going to go back into my tone curve for some final adjustments. I want to make this look a little bit more faded out, so I'm going to bring this black point up a little bit more. I'm going to bring the darks around that black point down. Yeah, that's looking a lot better. I'm gonna come down here to effects at this point, and I'm gonna add something I add to most of my photos, which is just a small vignette. Let's bring the feather way up, drop the midpoint down closer to the center of the photo. Go with about -15 here. That looks good. Now, this does not look like a very noisy photo, so I'm not gonna do any kind of major noise reduction here. Actually, I'm not going to do any noise reduction at all because that was at ISO 100 when I took it. So it's a really clean photo as it is. All right. So it's at this point with a photo that I would stop for a while. I would move on to another photo. I'd get up, go get a drink of water, come back, look at it. I then see if there's anything that I'd want to change. Like I already kind of want to change our crop a little bit, push the crop up a little bit more. That looks a lot more balanced now. I've got a little bit more sky to hold on to the weight of the foreground and the weight of this tree here. Yep, that works. And at this point, I would export the photo and post it on my social medias or do whatever it is that I'm going to do with the photo. So guys, with that said, I hope you enjoyed this particular editing tutorial. This really wasn't a tutorial more as it was a walkthrough on how I edit or how I edit my process. In any case, if you like my photos, if you like the photos that I'm editing, these are all photos that I shot myself, and you can see more of those photos by going to Instagram at FrazierOutdoorPhoto.com. If you want to see more behind the scenes type stuff, or you want to see photos that I may never post to Instagram or I may never post anywhere, be sure to follow me on Patreon. I have a lot of different things that I'm offering photographers and other people on my Patreon platform. So check that out. Links to both in the description below. I'll see you next time.